Greetings, boys. July 9th. That means we have the 1.1 Last Epoch Harbingers of Ruin release. I want to do a run through of the webpage here. This is just the Last Epoch forum, what's new post for the 1.1 patch, breaking down everything that's new, everything that's coming, so on and so forth. So first up, we have the evade mechanic. Now, everybody gets evade from level 1, and as you level up, the cooldown recovery speed gets better and better, so you can evade more and more. They went on to talk about how they wanted to add an evade because this raises the floor of mobility that all of the classes have access to. So going forward, as they design new mechanics and new bosses, they'll be able to keep this in mind when they're, say, giving us something to dodge, knowing that we can all move around a little bit better. On top of that, we'll also be getting some items that interact with evade. They have this carcinization of momentum one here that replaces evade by summon crab. And then they have a couple of boots that give you some cooldown reduction for using evade, which would stack with your level up cooldown reduction, I'm assuming. No skill tree, no hotbar assignment, it's its own button, and again raises the floor that everybody has as far as mobility is concerned. Now next up, we'll have the Nemesis system, which is something that we'll randomly run into as we play, both in the campaign and in the monolith. It seems like this is really going to give us something to look forward to, these random encounters, while we're working towards the pinnacle bosses. Something to spice up how before we were just doing monolith after monolith after monolith. This kind of throws a wrench into the equation and stirs the pot a little bit so that it's a little bit more spicy, like I said. So as you play, you'll run into Nemesis corpses, which you'll have the opportunity to interact with. When you do interact with them, you'll be presented with three options. Your first option is to banish the Nemesis. So you won't fight it and you won't get the items, but those items will be re-rolled the next time you see a Nemesis. Now your next option is to challenge the Nemesis, and that's pretty much exactly what you think it is. If you beat its ass, you get the items. If you don't, you don't. Your last option is going to be to empower the Nemesis. And this is essentially, you're going to make it stronger, and instead of killing it, it's going to run away, but upgrade the current items that it has. And it can get tier 6 and tier 7 affixes, which hasn't been possible before. And not only that, but you can do this twice. And I'm thinking that maybe doing that twice is how you could get a tier 7. One empower is 6, 2, 7, but we'll have to see exactly how that plays out. That's kind of just me guessing. Other than that, once you lose a fight to a Nemesis, the mechanic resets. So that's it. You'll run into another Nemesis and kind of start from square one there. It's also worth mentioning that we'll be earning something called the Egg of Forgotten. So if you immediately challenge the Nemesis, the egg is going to reward a random unique. Or you can instead replace it with your own unique that has no legendary potential. And when you empower the Nemesis, it has a chance to become a legendary by gaining affixes or gaining legendary potential. Now we have the big one. Harbingers and Forgotten Night. This is the pinnacle boss system that we've been waiting for since before Last Epoch's release. We've been waiting to see what kind of big boss system they come up with, and I have high hopes because they've done some pretty innovative things so far. So first, we have to defeat Harbingers that we come across once we're far along into the Monolith of Fate system. As we defeat these Harbingers, we will progress with the Forgotten Knights faction, and by doing that, we get closer and closer to fighting the leader of that faction. As we defeat Harbingers, we'll progress with the Forgotten Knight faction and get closer and closer to fighting one of the pinnacle bosses, essentially. As far as the Harbingers specifically, there's going to be two types, Agile and Brute, and this is basically two different categories of abilities that we'll have to deal with when we're fighting them. On top of that, Harbingers will also have abilities given to them by the 10 timeline bosses. You know, you do the whole monolith timeline, you fight the big boss at the end. Yeah, the Harbingers are going to have some of their abilities that we'll also have to be mindful of. So we'll need to defeat the Harbingers in all 10 timelines before being able to access the portal to what they're calling the most difficult fight in Last Epoch to date. We'll also have a chance to harvest an eye from a Harbinger upon defeating them. These eyes are what we use to access the portal to the pinnacle boss fights. The first 10 Harbingers we defeat, we guaranteed get an eye. So once you defeat 10, after that, it drops down to a chance. They don't say exactly what the chance is. I'm sure that that's titratable. Yeah, that's how it's going to work. Keep in mind that one eye is one attempt. So by the time you do all of the timeline Harbingers, you'll have 10 eyes. Now, you have to beat all of those Harbingers to unlock the Pinnacle Boss system, but you'll start off with 10 attempts, because you'll have all 10 eyes from the guaranteed first time drop chance. After that, when you defeat Harbingers, it's a chance to get an eye that gives you more attempts at the Pinnacle Boss fight. Going back to the Forgotten Knight faction, as we defeat the Harbingers, we'll be gaining reputation with them, and that will allow us to unlock things like special unique items that are specific to the mechanic, lucky blessings, and a new crafting material called the Glyph of Envy. I like a lot of the crafting materials in this game. It hopefully is another cool one. Now, for the Pinnacle Boss itself, we're going to be facing off against Aberth, who is going to, it sounds like, be a pretty epic fight. Like, we're going to go through all 4 of the different timelines and we're going to thrash it out. It should be mentioned that Aberth will not be available in the offline mode until it's been defeated in the online mode. Now, you might ask why? Because we voted on it, and that's why. So boss defenses are also getting a big update, and I'm just going to kind of read from this here because I think they explain it better than I could anyway. Up until 1.1, Last Epoch had a dynamic damage reduction mechanic. One of the biggest issues with the system was nobody knew about it. It wasn't a very clear system as it didn't have any sort of visual representation. It also was easy to misunderstand due to its dynamic nature and generally resulted in feels bad of seeing yourself doing less damage to bosses after a few hits without anything actively telling you why. Dealing more damage early on could also lull you into a false sense of security with more leech from that damage. Oh yeah. The Glyph of Envy is our new crafting item, and this is going to do a couple of things when we use it. One, it's going to upgrade an affix like a normal glyph would, but everything else about that item is going to change except for the type. So if you use this on an affix that's on a ring, the item is still going to be a ring, but it could be a different kind of ring. On top of doing all of that with the individual item, it's also going to grant stability to the last timeline that you entered. If you haven't completed the timeline yet, it fills the whole stability bar, so you can just do the quest and do the timeline boss right then after you use this. If you've already completed that timeline, it just gives you a big chunk of stability. These are only going to drop in level 100 timelines and mostly from rare enemies and Harbingers. We're also going to be getting an item called Harbinger's Needle, which is the first consumable that we'll be able to equip, and we equip it in the idle slot. When we have this slotted in the idle slot and we kill any level 90 or above timeline boss, it will give us a Gaze of Orbos, which essentially gives us a big boost of corruption on the timeline. The last thing that they have here are a few examples of new uniques that we're getting. We're getting a total of 30, so there's a lot of new items to look forward to. And these icons on here look fucking awesome. Like, this hammer looks badass. I love me a big hammer. All right, but listen to this: 55% penetration against all resistances with melee damage. So seems like there's going to be a lot of powerful new items added to the game. What else would we look forward to if not new cool shit to play with? All right, and there you have it. That's everything that's coming in 1.1 Harbingers of Ruin for Last Epoch. Have fun.